feels like the pain is never going to end, but it will. At least I can say it will stop affecting your life. I know that that's true because I've gone through 2 really bad breakups myself in my life, and we're going to talk about them now. The first relationship I got into sometime around 2003, 2004, and I'm not quite sure of when because I didn't even consider it a relationship until it ended, even though it lasted for about 5 or 6 years. This was definitely a toxic relationship. We were not nice to each other verbally, and we were not nice to each other physically. Why don't we sit down together so that I can be a little bit more comfortable as I talk about this? So when I met this person, I was in my mid-20s and having a hard time with life, but I was really just kind of looking for a friend. I was looking in an area where you would find a relationship in an online space, but met somebody, we hung out, things were casual, and it felt like a friendship to me. Unfortunately, we both had bad habits. One of his was drinking, which I would pick him up every day, bring him to my place, or we would park in public and he would drink. Never a good way to start the day. And the 2 of us just had bad habits. We were not nice to each other, as I said. I'll let you fill in the gaps. The bench wasn't such a great idea, ants. So what we're really here to talk about are the end of toxic relationships and how do you move on past them. And that's why I wanted to talk about these 2 relationships. That relationship ended with a big fight, and it may not have seemed like a special fight. We had gotten into fights many times before, but this one was the one, and I closed the door from my apartment that I was living in, slammed it, and said, no more, this is over, this is done, and I resolved to myself, I'm no longer in this relationship. But just because the relationship ended on my terms, that didn't make it easier to move on from. I still had a lot of pain, a lot of second guessing, a lot of fear about what was going to happen next, both immediately for my physical safety, but as well, just what is my life now? I also wondered a lot, did I make the right decision? And since I had a part in why this relationship was failing, what was my responsibility? Okay, we got a new bench, we're gonna try it. Something that helped me bring some closure to this relationship was that I decided that I was going to take responsibility for my part in things, and I was going to own that things didn't go well, but that doesn't mean that I have to have hard feelings about the person that I was shutting out of my life. So I think it was a couple of months after the relationship ended. I think I still have a copy, so I'm gonna throw it up on the screen. But I wrote an email because I was thinking about life a lot, and I wrote an email to many people in my life who I wanted to thank just for being there and for being an important part of my life. And I included my ex in that email that I sent out to people, and he didn't really believe it or understand it, and I just kind of confirmed when I responded to the email that yes, I meant it. But I didn't continue speaking with him, and I let time go on and experienced life. Part of experiencing life meant that I made some new friends, I had some dates, I did some stuff, I had some fun. But this time around, I was careful, I was observant of the quality of my relationships, and if they weren't good, they were gone. I think I was still discovering who I was when I came across my next partner that I was together with for 6 years, my most recent. So I still carried a little bit of what we'll call growth with me into that next relationship. And there were signs that I missed with that one too. You know, I went into it saying that we were going to be friends. I communicated that very clearly, and yet they stepped over that boundary. They introduced me to their sister, who I had just met, as the boyfriend when we had never even had that discussion. And in this relationship, in the beginning especially, there was emotional stuff going on from my part, from their part. But as it progressed, I grew, and I didn't see the same growth from them. And that relationship ended with them breaking up with me, which was so devastating because I knew that I had worked on myself and worked on the relationship, and the opposite came from their end. I will spare you all the details of that relationship. You're here for how to get over a toxic relationship. So the end of that relationship, the breakup was devastating, and I was not like the end of that other relationship. I was trying to figure out how to hold on to the relationship, how to make things work again. I was changing things about myself very rapidly. I was desperately seeking help from people. I was not in a good space. We had been in couples therapy, And so I continued exploring with the couples therapist and eventually with an individual therapist for a little bit what was going on, and that helped a little bit, but I was still frantic and all over the place, and things were changing, and I had to move out, and I had to figure out what I was doing with my life, and I was freaking out. And maybe like you, I came to YouTube and I was reading articles and just trying to put some context around what was happening, because none of it made sense to me. Once again, I was trying to figure out what was my responsibility here, what did I do wrong, and maybe what did my partner do wrong, and how did this relationship wind up this way, and what was I going to do going forward, because I didn't feel like there was a forward. I had built my entire future around this particular ex. The ex before that I was talking about, I didn't really see a future with him, so it was just kind of like this thing that casually went on for years and years, and I didn't even call it a relationship right away because it didn't feel like one. I actually started thinking about it as a relationship after it was all over, but with this one, we were engaged, I was all in, and I was seeing a future with him. So now, here I was, panicking, freaking out, not really having friends, and I didn't know what to do. Now, there absolutely were some people who tried to help me out, but they couldn't quite understand why I was acting the way that I was either, and why I was having such difficulty with this, so they weren't very helpful, and that's no fault of theirs, but this was hard. This was a toxic relationship in a different form, and the breakup took a totally different form and knocked me to my knees. And so what happened? How did I get out of this? How did I move on with life? Well, I started to see a vision for life. I started to see something different. I started to remove myself from the vision of me with this ex who was toxic. Not that they were toxic themselves, although they didn't have great behavior and I didn't have the perfect behavior either, but the relationship was toxic, and I needed to get out of that mindset that that was going to work, and I needed to come back to myself. I know that may not be what you want to hear right now if you're in the thick of it, and it's not something that I wanted to hear, but over time, gradually, step by step, little teeny tiny, piece by piece, bit by bit, I gradually started to walk myself away from that vision of the future and towards a new vision of the future. One future that included what I'm doing right here, right now, which is to be on YouTube. I didn't have this when I was together with that ex. It was too toxic, and I didn't have the confidence in myself to be able to do something like this. But once I started to plan a future and see ahead a new kind of life that I could experience with positive things in it, that started to be the catalyst that allowed me to go a little bit further, a little bit further, a little bit further. Now, this wasn't something that happened quickly, believe me, and it wasn't something that was easy, but especially compared to that first relationship, because that was on my terms, and it was clear to me that this was never going to work. This was something I was desperately trying to hold on to. But even though I had days where things fell backwards, even though I had days where everything seemed hopeless, even though I had days where I just wanted everything to go away and to go back to the way that things were, I made it. And I want you to see that in the way that I speak about these relationships. I'm not crying. I'm not furiously angry. Those emotions are still inside of me. If I sit down and think about the memories and go backwards, I can cry. I can get angry for sure. I can feel bitter. I can feel good feelings too about the old relationships, but they don't affect my life. So this isn't everything. This isn't how you get over a toxic relationship entirely. But I would say a key part of it is to start seeing a vision of a positive future by yourself without your ex in it. I know that's hard. I know it's not something you want to do every day, and that's okay, but it's something that you should aim for. So I want you to do something for me now. Think about something that you used to do before your ex was in your life, before you ever knew who they were. What is it? And is it something that you can continue to do now? If you feel like sharing, leave it down below in the comments.